I'm Erica.
And I'm Caitlyn.
And this is episode 6 of Let's Go Sew, Sewing for Beginners. Today, we are going to make our project. We're going to make June Tailor 2.5-inch strip Quilt-As-You-Go Mug Mats. And it's from a kit. And by the end of this episode, you'll have completed all 3 of the mug mats included with this kit. So Caitlyn, let's walk everybody through what's inside the kit.
All right. In your kit, you will get an instructions and printed batting for all 3 patterns.
Okay.
So when you get to this point in opening your kit, we can go ahead and prep our batting.
Okay.
For our first mug mat here. So as you can see here, here's our printed batting. And we're going to cut these shapes out of the batting, leaving a 1/4 of an inch all the way around this outermost line.
Okay, and we're gonna do that with, let me guess, our ruler and our rotary cutter, and of course we've already got our cutting mat surface underneath.
Yes.
All right, so let's show them how to do that.
To do that, it's very similar to cutting our pieces, and we're going to put the ruler on towards the design side so that we don't cut through our design.
Right.
And then we're going to put the 1/4 inch mark on this blue line here.
Okay.
And we're going to just, as our normal cutting, go along the blade and cut your batting apart. So now we have a 1/4 of an inch on this side. And then we're gonna just continue on doing that until we get it cut out.
All of our pieces cut apart. Now remember, you also have instructions that come inside the kit. And you're gonna need we reference these in our cutting episode. So if you haven't already cut all of your pieces like we talked about in that cutting episode, I recommend that you read through this instruction sheet and go ahead, maybe rewatch that video and get all of your fabric pieces prepped and cut. And if you've already got them, go ahead and grab them now so we can get started. Now, this is a Quilt-As-You-Go kit, which is a little bit different than what we practiced in the last episode, which was just sewing seams. We're still going to be sewing seams in the same manner, but while we're sewing those seams, we're actually going to be quilting our project as well. Now, if you're asking, isn't that the same? It's actually called piecing what we did before, just sewing those 2 pieces together. Quilting is the process of layering the batting between 2 pieces of fabric and joining those layers together by hand with hand stitches or machine stitches. So we're going to be piecing and quilting all in one step. So the first thing that we did was to cut out our printed mug mat from the batting. And Caitlyn, we're going to be using a self-binding method, right?
Correct.
All right, so why don't you walk us through what we do next?
All right, so as Quilt-As-You-Go suggests, we're going to put our backing layer on while we're piecing. So we have a backing layer cut to a 12 by 15, which is what's in the instructions.
Okay.
And this is what's going to give us the room to do our self-binding. So eventually this is going to be our binding, this extra fabric here.
Perfect.
So when we do this, we want to make sure that our batting is centered as best as possible on this to give an even border so that we can use that for the binding.
Okay.
And we can attach our batting to the backing using pins, or what we like to use is basting spray, which is you simply spray it on the back of the batting, and then you put it down onto your backing fabric and you smooth it out, and it will give a nice adhesion so that when you're sewing, it doesn't move.
Okay, now we're not going to spray that on the set, so there's a third option, and that would be using a fabric glue stick.
So it's similar to the basting spray. It's an adhesive that will keep these layers together. And what you can just simply do is do a few lines on the batting, and then you just put it down, and then it's nice and stuck.
All right, Caitlyn, I think we're ready to sew, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so the first thing to note is that the lines you see on this batting are placement lines. They're not stitching lines. Can you explain that a little better?
Yes, so the edge of the fabric will lay on these lines, and we're going to sew our 1/4 of an inch from that line.
Okay.
So not on the line.
So I noticed we've got pieces numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, and 7. And you've got our fabric there, so I'm guessing we're going to start with 1.
Yes, and as we suggested, or we said that these pieces are all on our instructions, so you piece based on what you cut. So this is our piece 1, and we're going to just lay that on our piece 1 section. And as you can see, it fits perfectly within that line.
Right.
And then, like our practice sewing with seams, we're going to put these right sides together. So this is piece 2, and we're going to put them right sides together and lay it nice and flat over the top.
Okay.
Now, you can either pin or glue these in place just to have them hold.
Okay.
I'm going to pin today, and we're going to pin shallow so that we don't pucker our fabric. So we're just going to do one little pin here and one little pin here. So now from here, we just do our normal 1/4 inch seam allowance from this line.
Okay. All right, to the machine, Miss Caitlyn.
All right, so we're going to put our project underneath the pressure foot so that the edge of this side, which is the one for between piece 1 and 2, is on the side that we set our 1/4 inch.
Okay, perfect.
And we're going to just do exactly what we did to sew our 1/4 inch. So we put the pressure foot down, we start a little bit onto our fabric, and we're going to do a couple seams or stitches forward and then a couple stitches back. And then we're going to continue on down the seam. Again, at the end, we want to just do a few tacks back and a few forward.
Okay.
So we have our first seam sewn here.
Now, unlike when we showed the sewing our seams in our last episode, we're not going to grab our iron because there is some poly in here. This is a blend, and we don't want to distort our batting. So we've got an answer to how to press out that seam, and it's called the June Tailor's Magic Seam Wand.
Yes. So as we did in our pressing, we're going to just flip this to the right side up. Okay. And as you can see, that next line falls right onto the placement line. So if we want to make sure that our seams are nice and crisp, we take our Magic Seam Wand and we just run it across and make sure that it's nice and flat. We can also finger press, which is you just take your fingers and do the exact same thing, but the Magic Seam Wand makes sure it's nice and crisp.
It really does. All right, so now the next thing to do is move on to piece number 3, right?
Yes, and piece number 3, you're going to just continue on like we did with piece 1 and 2. Take number 3, put it on top, right sides together, and then sew on this seam.
Okay, so we're going to go do that. We'll give you a chance to get caught up. We're going to sew together. You're going to be sewing on pieces 1, 2, then 3 and 4, and then come back. We're back. We've got pieces 1 through 4 sewn on. It's time for 5, but we're going to change directions. Caitlyn, can you show us how we're going to line up piece 5?
Yes. Very simple. It's just like our other ones. We're just going to take it and put it across 1 through 4 on this placement line. So you're going to take your piece and you're going to put it on this placement line, and then you're going to pin and sew like you did for the 1 through 4 and flip it over. So then you would continue on with 5, 6, and 7.
Perfect. All right, let's get your pieces sewn. We'll take a break. Come back when you've got it done. All right, so we've got our pieces sewn on the Mug Mat 1. We're going to give you a look at how the other 2 lay out because they're all going to be just a little different. So we've got pieces 1 and 2 down here on this one, and you'll notice our pieces are on an angle. So we're going to make it's going to make lining them up just a little different.
Yes.
So why don't you show everybody how we're going to do that?
So on our first one, you could tell that all of our pieces fit exactly in those printed areas. Well, considering we have a few angles and it goes past it, you just want to line it up with the previous seam that you did. So you would just line that up and make sure it's lined up here and here.
Okay.
And then you would sew from here to here. You don't want to go past this because this is what we're going to use for
we're going to be
binding.
using this. So if you were to sew this all the way down, you'd end up having to unsew that. And we try to avoid that if we can, don't we? All right, so again, we're going to lay it down. We're going to use those placement lines, and we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam just parallel to this right here. and we're gonna go from blue line to blue line. So let's take a look at the third one. I'm gonna keep moving that pin just a little bit.
So this is very similar to the first one, and these pieces will line up pretty much in the printed area except for the ends.
Okay.
And you're going to want to do that same thing and just not go past your border. And then you'll have it again where you put a different direction on, so you would put your right sides together and you would just line it up on that placement line.
Okay, and then when you sew it, it's going to flip over and again meet up perfectly with that next placement line. All right, great. We'll let you go get caught up with sewing the pieces on your other two. Okay, Caitlyn, we've got our pieces all sewn together. We're back to our original mat. We'll take a look at the others. This is what it looks like, and let's take a look at what the others look like.
Yes, so as we said, that these have pieces outside the borders.
Right.
And so our next step is going to be talking about how to trim these.
Okay.
And as you can see with this one as well.
All right, so how are we going to manage that trimming? Because we don't have any trimming to do here at all.
No, because those are exactly in the shape. So
right.
On this one, we're going to show you how to trim it. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over this way.
Okay.
And then we're going to expose our fabric from this, and we're going to fold this to make sure that it's past the batting. So we don't want to cut through this piece.
Right.
So we're going to do that, make sure it's nice and flat. So we're going to take our ruler and our rotary cutter, and we're going to trim it just past, or just flush with this.
Flush with the
batting.
Batting. Okay.
So we're going to take the ruler edge and put it flush with the batting edge, and then we're just going to take our rotary cutter and go along and trim those off.
Great.
And then you're going to continue on and do it on all four sides.
Okay. All right. You should have all of your mug mats now trimmed, and we're ready for the next step. Caitlyn, take it away.
All right. So we gave you extra fabric on the sides here to trim just because if you didn't get this quite centered.
Okay.
So we're going to cut 1 inch away from the batting edge.
Okay.
And we're going to do that with our ruler again by taking this and then putting our 1 inch mark on the batting edge.
Okay.
And make sure it's nice and straight on your batting. And then we're going to just trim off the excess fabric. And we're going to do that on all four sides.
All right, let's go ahead and keep trimming. All right, we're all trimmed up now, so let's go over the next step.
Okay, so self-binding is when you flip your backing fabric over onto the front, but we want to make sure we don't have a raw edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by folding this in and aligning it to the batting edge.
Okay.
And we're going to press that. And then when we get to the corners, I'll also show you something special to create a mitered corner.
Okay, I'm going to slide this over for you. This is the cut and press. And here's our little Aliso iron. We've got both of those on our website.
So we're going to first take and fold it in so that the edge is aligned with the batting.
Okay.
And we're going to do a nice press. And then we're going to fold it in one more time so it's on top.
Okay.
And you can do a nice little press too. And then when you get to the corner, you're going to take it into the corner and then turn it to 45 degrees so it's aligned with this edge of the batting.
Okay.
And then we're going to fold this in like we did this side. So first start by folding it towards the batting edge.
Okay.
And we're going to give that a little press. And you can press the corner as well. Put it in one more time. And you can see that we have a nice 45-degree angle here, which is a mitered corner.
So are we going to put a pin there?
Of course.
Okay, or a binding clip.
Yes.
If you have binding clips, this is a great time to use those.
So you can pin as you go, and you put pin in the corner as well. And then just continue pinning until you want to pin nice so it stays flat while we sew it on. And then you can continue on and you do the same thing with every corner.
All right, we have finished getting our self-binding all turned around. See, we've taken that back fabric and wrapped it around to finish those edges, And you'll do each one of these the same way. And so now we're ready to do what we call top stitching, which is going to be stitching it just real close to the edge, right?
Correct.
So let's show everybody how to do that next step, Caitlyn.
All right. Now I'm going to use the same color thread just so you can see where the stitching is. But if you don't like to see your stitching, you can always change to the color of your fabric.
Right, so we've got a pale pink. You're gonna see it standing out. But if we were to switch this to a black, then it wouldn't show up for you.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start on the side of the project, about halfway down. And I recentered my needle because we're going to use the guides on the foot instead of the 1/4 inch that we're going to do. And we're going to go fairly close to the edge of this binding. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're just going to lower your foot about however close you wanna get. Because we did fold these under all the way, so it's going to catch through. Right. So if you're a beginner, maybe start further in, and if you wanna get closer later on when you feel more comfortable, that will be fine.
You bet.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to do our few stitches forward and our few stitches back to hold it in place. And then we're going to just use the guide foot and keep it on the same spot that we determined that we wanted to use. Okay. And we're just gonna keep going and taking our pins out as we go. And if you need to and you see it bunching up, you can always push this down and hold it while it's going through the pressure foot. And then when we get to the corner, you can always use a stylus as well, just to keep your fingers too far away from the machine. So
you don't want to sew through your fingers.
So what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that that mitered is still nice and crisp. And we're going to go all the way over it to about the amount that we're using as our seam or our allowance from the edge. So we're going to just go a few over. And then we're gonna make sure our needle is down.
So use your hand, you're gonna use your hand, there you go. You're gonna stick it down, and now you can pick up your foot and what we call pivot.
And then we're just gonna make sure it's at the same mark as what we're using on this side.
Okay.
And then you continue on. All right, as we finish up here, we're gonna go a little past what we started with, and then we're going to do our another tacking. So a few stitches back and a few stitches forward. And then your project is done.
Look at that, you've just completed your very first mug rug. Now you're gonna wanna do the same thing for all your others. And don't be discouraged if there's some imperfections. Nobody ever started this by making something picture perfect the first time. Sewing is a skill that gets easier with practice, and the best way to practice, and the most fun, I think, is to make projects. We have quite a few Quilt-As-You-Go projects on our website that are great for beginners. So if you've enjoyed learning this new craft and would like to try another, you can find resources. In the resources for this series, you can find a list of all of those projects. Now, I think one of the key reasons that people are discouraged when learning to sew is that they pick a pattern that's maybe too advanced for them. Do you agree, Caitlyn?
I do agree.
So it's because it's more interesting, which is true, but our advice to you is to start simple and work your way up to those more complex projects. Don't decide your first project is going to be a king-size double wedding ring quilt, okay? Now, another thing I want to point out is that for this series, Caitlyn's been sewing standing up. Now, some people do sew standing up, but when you're first getting started, it's probably going to be easier for you if you're sewing sitting down. We stand up here because we want to make sure that you can see what we're doing. If you happen to be working with Go dies, I would recommend looking at our Go Cube sets. You can make over 72 different quilt blocks with one set of dies, and Repetition is good practice, wouldn't you say, Caitlyn?
Of course.
Okay. Well, we hope you've enjoyed learning how to sew and that you are ready and excited to try even more projects. Thank you for watching us, and
happy sewing.